In ancient India, religion was not something ordinary people could easily approach. Spiritual power belonged mostly to priests, rituals, and sacred formulas spoken in a language the common farmer could not understand. Society was divided by birth. Your future was decided before you could even speak. If you were born into a higher caste, you were considered spiritually valuable. If you were born lower, many believed you carried the burden of bad karma from past lives and deserved your suffering. Religion became deeply tied to hierarchy, sacrifice, and authority. Into this world walked a man who completely shattered the assumptions of his time, when Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha. He did not simply create another philosophy. He started a revolution of the human mind. What made him dangerous was not violence, political ambition, or armies. It was something much more powerful. He told ordinary people that liberation did not belong to priests. Awakening did not belong to one caste. Truth did not belong to ancient scriptures alone. Every human being had the capacity to wake up from suffering through direct understanding. In a civilization built upon inherited spiritual authority, this was explosive. The Buddha rejected the idea that rituals alone could purify the soul. He questioned animal sacrifices. He challenged the authority of the Brahmins, the priestly class that claimed spiritual superiority through birth and mastery of the Vedas. Instead of teaching that salvation came through pleasing gods or performing ceremonies, he taught that suffering arises from craving, ignorance, and attachment inside the human mind itself. The battlefield was internal. The solution was awareness. This message spread like fire because ordinary people had been spiritually trapped for generations. Imagine being a poor villager hearing for the first time that enlightenment is possible for you, regardless of your birth. Imagine hearing that no priest stands between you and liberation. Imagine hearing that wisdom matters more than bloodline. This was unlike anything India had heard before. The Buddha also spoke in the language of the people. While religious knowledge was often preserved in Sanskrit, associated with elites and scholars, the Buddha used local dialects that common people understood. This decision alone changed history. He made spiritual teaching accessible. His words could be remembered by merchants, laborers, kings, farmers, and even those rejected by society. Many people joined him because he embodied what he taught. Ancient India was filled with wandering ascetics, teachers, and philosophers. Some starved themselves. Some performed extreme rituals. Some claimed mystical powers. The Buddha had explored these paths personally and rejected them after discovering they did not end suffering. He taught the middle way, avoiding both luxury and self-torture. People saw balance in him. Calmness. Fearlessness. Accounts describe kings bowing before him and criminals abandoning violence after hearing him speak. One of the most revolutionary parts of his movement was the Sangha, the monastic community. Inside the Sangha, caste distinctions were erased. A prince and a former servant could sit side by side as equals. In ancient India, this was radical beyond imagination. Society outside the monastery remained deeply hierarchical, but within the Buddha's order, a different world was being created. The Buddha also allowed women to join the monastic order. Though the rules for nuns reflected the limitations of the time, this was still revolutionary compared to much of ancient Indian society. Women became respected teachers and enlightened practitioners. Some of the earliest Buddhist texts contain poems and teachings from awakened women describing their liberation with incredible emotional power. Crowds followed the Buddha because his teachings addressed real suffering rather than abstract speculation. Many philosophers debated the universe endlessly. The Buddha focused on direct experience. Why do humans suffer? Why are we never satisfied? Why does pleasure fade? Why does the mind cling? Why are we afraid of death? These were universal questions. His answers were practical rather than theoretical. Observe the mind. Understand craving. Develop ethical living. Train awareness. See reality clearly. Freedom will emerge naturally. This practicality made Buddhism spread rapidly across social classes. Merchants supported the Sangha because Buddhist ethics encouraged honesty and non-violence. Kings supported Buddhism because the Buddha taught social harmony and moral leadership. Ordinary people supported Buddhism because it gave dignity to human suffering and hope for liberation, but the rise of Buddhism created a massive challenge for the older Brahmanical tradition that would later evolve into what we now call Hinduism. Buddhism was not a small movement hidden in isolation. For centuries it became one of the dominant spiritual forces in India. Great emperors like Ashoka supported it openly. Buddhist monasteries became centers of learning, philosophy, and culture. Buddhist missionaries traveled across Asia. Entire civilizations were transformed by the Dharma. As Buddhism grew stronger, Brahmanical traditions faced a problem. The Buddha's teachings were attracting huge numbers of people because they were ethically compelling, intellectually sophisticated, and spiritually accessible. The older religious system could not ignore this forever. Over time, Hindu traditions began adapting in response to Buddhism. This is where history becomes extremely fascinating. Many ideas that later became central in Hindu traditions either developed through interaction with Buddhism or were reshaped because of Buddhist influence. The emphasis on non-violence became stronger partly because Buddhism criticized animal sacrifice. Meditation practices expanded dramatically through interaction with Buddhist methods. Renunciation traditions became more influential. Philosophical schools evolved sophisticated arguments partly in response to Buddhist logic and metaphysics. Perhaps the most striking example is the transformation of the Buddha himself within Hinduism. Instead of continuing to treat him as a dangerous rival, many Hindu traditions absorbed him into their worldview by declaring him an avatar of Vishnu. This was an incredibly strategic move. By turning the Buddha into part of Hindu cosmology, Buddhism's challenge could be softened. The revolutionary became integrated into the system he once questioned, but this absorption came with reinterpretation. In some Hindu texts, the Buddha avatar appears as a figure sent to mislead demons away from Vedic truth. In others, he is treated more respectfully as a divine incarnation. Either way, the historical Buddha's rejection of Vedic authority became difficult to preserve once he was placed inside a framework centered around those very traditions. Yet Buddhism and Hinduism remain deeply different in important ways. The Buddha denied the existence of a permanent eternal self, the Atman, which many Hindu philosophies considered fundamental. Instead, he taught anatta, the doctrine of non-self. According to the Buddha, what we call a person is a constantly changing process rather than a fixed essence. This idea struck at the heart of many existing metaphysical assumptions. The Buddha also avoided speculating endlessly about cosmic origins or divine absolutes. He focused on suffering and liberation. When asked metaphysical questions about eternity, infinity, or the ultimate nature of the universe, he often refused to answer if the question did not help end suffering. This frustrated many philosophers but made his teaching psychologically powerful and practical. Another major difference involved authority. In Brahmanical traditions, the Vedas were often treated as sacred revelation. The Buddha rejected the idea that truth depended on scripture alone. He encouraged investigation and direct experience. In one famous discourse, he advised people not to believe something merely because it was tradition, scripture, or taught by respected authorities. Tested through experience and wisdom, this attitude attracted thinkers, skeptics, and seekers across India. Buddhism became one of the most intellectually rigorous traditions in the ancient world. Buddhist philosophers developed advanced systems of logic, psychology, epistemology, and metaphysics. Universities like Nalanda became global centers of learning centuries before many famous Western institutions existed. Ironically, some later Hindu philosophers were deeply influenced by Buddhist methods even while arguing against Buddhism itself. Thinkers such as Shankara developed sophisticated responses to Buddhist philosophy, but scholars still debate how much Buddhist influence shaped the evolution of Advaita Vedanta. The intellectual exchange between Buddhism and Hindu traditions was intense and continuous for centuries. Over time, Buddhism gradually declined in India for many reasons. Hindu traditions adapted and regained strength. Royal support shifted. Buddhist monasteries sometimes became wealthy and disconnected from ordinary people. Invasions destroyed major Buddhist centers of learning. Buddhism survived more strongly outside India in places like Sri Lanka, China, Tibet, Japan, Thailand, and Southeast Asia, yet the Buddha's revolution never truly disappeared. His ideas traveled across continents and reshaped civilizations. Today millions meditate because of methods rooted in Buddhist practice. Modern psychology increasingly studies mindfulness and compassion. The Buddha's analysis of suffering continues to influence philosophy, neuroscience, and mental health worldwide, and perhaps the greatest proof of the Buddha's revolutionary power is this: even traditions that opposed him could not ignore him. They had to respond to him, adapt to him, absorb parts of him, reinterpret him. The presence of the Buddha transformed the spiritual landscape of India permanently. The reason crowds followed the Buddha was not because he promised wealth, miracles, or divine favoritism. He offered something much more radical. He offered freedom from psychological suffering through understanding. He treated human beings as capable of awakening regardless of birth or status. He challenged systems built on inherited spiritual privilege. He spoke directly to the fears, cravings, and anxieties hidden inside every mind. His revolution was silent but unstoppable. No armies marched behind him. No kingdoms were conquered in his name during his lifetime. Yet ideas proved stronger than weapons. A single man sitting beneath a tree, observing the nature of suffering, ended up transforming half the world. Even now, more than 2,000 years later, the Buddha remains dangerous to rigid systems because his message bypasses authority and goes directly into human experience. If suffering comes from attachment and ignorance, then no institution can fully control liberation. If awareness matters more than ritual, then spiritual power belongs to anyone willing to look deeply into the mind. That is why people followed him. And that is why his rivals eventually had to change because of him.